My name's Barbara Reekman. I'm the Pathways Guidance Coordinator for the Melbourne AMEP, and I've been working, I guess, in a cross-cultural setting with newly arrived migrants for about 20 years. And I think for people working in the AMEP, it's very important to be aware that cultural differences exist and will influence behaviour. People from different cultural backgrounds have different values, different beliefs, and verbal and non-verbal communications might have completely different meanings. It's really important to speak slowly and clearly, not raising your voice, and avoid slang and jargon, and if possible have some visual cues to show what you're talking about. Another thing that is quite interesting in communities from different cultures is there are completely different naming conventions. Not everybody has a first name and a surname. For example, the Chin and the Karen communities from Myanmar just have a first name. So if you're asking them for their first name and their last name, it's very confusing. And in a lot of Islamic communities, in particular the Somali community, everybody has their grandfather's name as their last name. So in a family, the mother, the children and the father will all have a different last name. So they don't fit neatly into what we're used to in terms of names. Now I'd like to talk, I suppose, things that might come up in the classroom, and one of the things I guess is non-verbal communication gestures. In my role as the AMEP counsellor, had a few students, Arabic-speaking students, come and complain about teachers saying shush, shush. For some reason they found that very offensive, but there's no way really that a teacher would know that. So I think it's actually a very good idea to ask students politely to let you know if you're doing anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, because and having sort of cultural differences as a topic in the classroom and an open discussion about it will be really good for everybody, and also because they need to learn Australian cultural norms so that they can more easily fit in a workplace. I recently had a conversation with a young Ethiopian woman who'd done the CELPET course, and she cited learning about Australian workplace culture in CELPET is really valuable to help her fit in the workplace, because in Ethiopia, relationships in a workplace are really formal, and you would never be calling your manager by their first name or really be on any kind of friendly terms. It's very formal. And in Australia, workplaces generally are quite informal, so she found it really useful to learn those kinds of things. I want to talk about the influence of religion on people's behaviour and habits, and this manifests itself often in food, so that it's very common in AMEP classes to have people sharing food, but you need to be aware that Muslims generally don't eat pork, Hindus generally don't eat beef, and many Hindus and Buddhists are vegetarian. So a person's religion will influence their food types. And also religious events such as Ramadan can influence a class, because Muslims have to fast between sunrise and sunset during the month of Ramadan. So it's really important that teachers are aware of that and don't organise barbecues and things during Ramadan. Another thing that's quite important is Muslim women and men often don't touch cross-gender, so that many Muslim men will not be comfortable shaking a woman's hand and vice versa, but it doesn't apply to everybody. But you just have to be aware that it might be the case that a man won't want to shake your hand or a woman won't want to shake a man's hand. And also, in some cases, they're not comfortable working in cross-gender groups or even classes. Some women aren't allowed to go to class because there are men in the class. So I had an example. I was recently running some training for volunteer tutors, and a young man called Ali, who was a Muslim man from Egypt, came late, and I sent him to work at a table with, I think, 3 or 4 young women, and he said, "What, do you want me to sit with the girls?" And I said, yes, not sort of thinking about it, because I like everybody to mix. And then a little bit later on at break time, I went up to him and I said to him, look, are you uncomfortable about working in a group of women? And he said, no, it's fine, but thank you for asking. And the fact that I'd actually taken the trouble to ask that really created a good rapport with him, because it showed to him that I knew something about his culture. So I think it's very important, where possible, to learn something about the culture of the students that you're working with, and to show polite curiosity about people's culture, and maybe learn a couple of words in their language, because it just makes people feel welcome and accepted. Another thing that has come out a lot for me in my role giving pathways advice to students is the sort of locus of decision making in cultures. We come from a very individual empowerment type of culture, where people are supposed to make decisions and fulfil their own dreams, whereas many cultures from Asia and the Middle East are collective cultures, where decisions are made by families, or husbands might make decisions for wives, or whole communities might make decisions about what they think is the best path for a person to take in their employment, I guess. So I've had many cases of Indian women who've come here, married Indian men, and they'd be highly qualified women with degrees in computer systems. And when we're talking about a pathway, they always say, oh, I'll have to ask my husband. They won't make a decision without consulting with their husband. And sometimes I invite them to bring their husbands in, because then we can have a collective discussion about it, and the husband feels included. So even though I might secretly be thinking, I wouldn't be asking my husband, I have to be accepting of what their cultural norm is in that case.